The galaxy had always been a vast and unpredictable place, stretching far beyond the reaches of human imagination. Earth had always been isolated, a blue planet on the outer rim of the Milky Way, its inhabitants unaware of the dangers that lurked beyond the star's life. Went on quietly until the first signal was detected, a strange transmission that seemed to be coming from the farthest reaches of space. Earth's top scientists were confused at first, unable to trace its origin. It was unlike any message they had ever encountered. It was not of human design, and it was not of any known alien race. The signal seemed to pulse rhythmically, as though it was alive, pulsing like a heartbeat, growing stronger with each passing day. The first reaction was fear. What did it mean? What kind of force could send a message like this across the galaxy? But the mystery deepened when a second transmission arrived, this one in a language humans could understand. The message was clear yet cryptic, at once warning of an impending disaster for Earth from the depths of space. A race called the Shiker was coming. They were conquerors with no mercy. They would destroy Earth and all who lived upon it. The transmission offered no further details, only the name of a race and a grim prediction that humanity had no chance against them. The Shiker were notorious across the galaxy for their advanced technology and ruthless nature. They had consumed countless worlds and left nothing but ruins behind. Their fleets were enormous, their weapons devastating, and their ability to control minds through psychic powers left even the most powerful species helpless in the face of their invasion. Earth's leaders were in turmoil as they processed the message. The world had not known war in centuries. How could they defend against such a powerful force? The message warned that only one thing could save them, something Earth had no understanding of, something hidden deep within their own planet. A primal force was buried within Earth itself, a power unlike any seen in the universe. But it was dormant, and it had to be awakened. If Earth was to survive, it would be a gamble, one that could change the course of humanity forever, or it could destroy them completely. They had no choice but to try. As panic spread across the globe, the United Nations convened an emergency summit. The world's leaders struggled to make sense of the situation. Who were the Shiker? Why were they coming? Why now? And what could this mysterious power beneath the earth be? Some suggested that the message was a trap, others feared the worst. But there was no time to debate. The threat was real and humanity was on the brink of annihilation. A decision had to be made. Captain Alina Morrow was among the first to hear of the transmission. She had spent years serving in Earth's defense forces and had never encountered an enemy like this. She knew they were outmatched by the Shiker, but the message gave her hope, however uncertain. It was the idea that Earth's salvation lay beneath their feet, was a theory she was willing to entertain with urgency. She gathered a team of scientists and soldiers for a mission to search for whatever hidden power might exist below the surface of the planet, a mission that could hold the key to humanity's survival. But she had no idea what they were about to unleash, or if they would survive to see it. Captain Alina Morrow stood at the helm of the transport ship, looking out over the rugged landscape of Tibet below. The wind whipped through the mountains, carrying with it a sense of unease. She wasn't sure what to expect, but the mission ahead was more critical than anything she had ever faced. The message from the unknown source was clear. Whatever lay beneath these ancient mountains might be the last hope for humanity. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, a sharp contrast to the sterile corridors of the ship. Her team, a small but determined group of experts, gathered around the briefing table, eyes focused on the map of the region. According to the data, Dr. Marcus Lynn, the linguist and archaeologist on the team, began, "The structure we're looking for is buried deep within the mountain range. It's not on any modern map, but old texts speak of it, though in a way that suggests it's been hidden for centuries. We're talking about something older than any known civilization." Alina nodded. The message they had received had mentioned this place, this relic. It seemed like more of a myth than anything real, but the situation was desperate. She couldn't afford to let doubt cloud her judgment now. Any chance the locals know anything about this place? Dr. Lin hesitated for a moment, looking at the rest of the team. There are stories from the ancient monks. They spoke of a power buried beneath the earth, a force that could change the world if it was ever awakened. They called it the Wrath of Earth. Alina's brows furrowed. The wrath of Earth. The phrase sounded ominous, but it also felt significant, like it might be more than just folklore. She glanced at the satellite images on the screen. There was something beneath those mountains, something far too large to be anything natural. They began their trek through the mountains, the ascent steep and treacherous. The journey was long, and the further they traveled, the more Alina felt the weight of what they were about to do. The world above them might be falling apart, but the power of the relic, if it existed, could reshape everything. By the time they reached the base of the mountain, dusk had begun to fall, and the air was turning cold. Their equipment was heavy, and the rugged terrain made their progress slow. But Alina knew they had to keep moving. There was no time to waste. As night set in, they reached a narrow cave entrance hidden beneath a cliff. According to the ancient texts Dr. Lin had deciphered, this was the place. The air inside the cave was damp and still, but there was something strange about the atmosphere. It was as if the cave itself was alive. The further they ventured into the darkness, the more the air seemed to hum with energy. "I don't like this," one of the soldiers muttered, his voice echoing off the walls. The others didn't respond, their eyes fixed ahead as they made their way deeper into the labyrinthine tunnels. After hours of careful navigation, they finally arrived at a vast underground chamber. In the center of the room stood an enormous structure, covered in ancient, unfamiliar symbols. It was a machine, or at least something that looked like one. The walls around them were lined with carvings depicting strange beings, some humanoid, some monstrous, all reaching toward a glowing core at the center of the device. The room pulsed with an eerie, almost sentient energy, and for a moment, Alina felt a strange connection to it, as though the machine was calling to her. Dr. Lin stepped forward, his eyes wide with awe. This is it. This is the relic we were searching for. This machine is unlike anything in human history. Alina could feel the weight of the moment. She wasn't just standing in front of a piece of forgotten history. She was facing the key to Earth's survival, or its destruction. There was no turning back now. "Let's get to work," Alina said, her voice steady despite the overwhelming uncertainty in the air. The fate of humanity rested on this ancient alien device, and whether they could unlock its power in time to save the world. The next few days passed in a blur of activity. Alina's team worked tirelessly around the ancient machine, examining its structure, decoding its symbols, and trying to understand the enigmatic design. But no matter how much they researched, they couldn't quite figure out how it worked or what it was truly capable of. Dr. Lin spent hours poring over the texts, trying to make sense of the alien language etched into the walls of the chamber. Some of the symbols resembled the ancient languages of Earth, but others were completely foreign, impossible to identify. Yet despite the complexity of the task, there was something undeniably powerful about the machine. Every time Alina stepped into the chamber, she could feel it. This pull, this energy, as though the machine was waiting for something. It almost felt alive, humming with potential, its power lying dormant just beneath the surface. One evening, as the team was preparing to rest, the emergency communication system they'd set up buzzed to life. The static-filled voice on the other end was familiar, but it carried an unmistakable sense of urgency. "Captain Morrow, you need to listen carefully." The voice of General Darius echoed over the transmission. "The Shiker are here. They've launched their full-scale invasion." Alina's heart sank. She had feared this moment, but now it was real. The Shiker were coming, and Earth's defenses were already failing. Reports had come in from major cities all over the world. Massive Shiker warships appeared from the depths of space, blotting out the skies. They began their assault with terrifying precision, hitting key military and communication centers before humanity even had a chance to react. Entire fleets of Earth's best ships had been overwhelmed within hours, their technology no match for the Shiker's advanced weaponry. "Captain, we have no choice," General Darius continued. "We need you to activate whatever is down there." The planet is falling apart. If you can even give us a chance to fight back, you need to do it now." Alina didn't respond immediately. She looked at Dr. Lin, who had been listening intently. His face was pale, his eyes wide with realization. "We've only scratched the surface of understanding this relic," he said quietly. "We can't be sure it will work, or worse, what it might do to the planet." Alina clenched her jaw. They had no time for hesitation. The Shiker had already proven their ruthlessness. They would not stop until Earth was nothing more than a distant memory. And from the way the situation was spiraling out of control, Earth might not have the luxury of time. "We don't have a choice," she replied, her voice firm. "Prepare the machine. We're activating it." The team quickly sprang into action, gathering their equipment and setting up the necessary connections to begin the process. Dr. Lin worked to translate more of the symbols, hoping they would unlock the key to activating the machine. Every second that ticked by felt like an eternity as the planet's fate hung in the balance. The Shiker's fleet was already within Earth's atmosphere, their ships descending toward major cities. Alina could hear the distant rumblings of the planet beneath them, tremors that were becoming more frequent, more intense. It felt like Earth itself was waking up, its heartbeat accelerating. There was no going back now. As Dr. Lin made the final adjustments to the machine, Alina's mind raced. What if they were making a mistake? What if activating this power only made things worse? But what was the alternative? Surrendering to the Shiker? She had seen enough of their methods in the reports. Whole populations wiped out without mercy. There was no room for second thoughts now. Finally, with a deep breath, Dr. Lin activated the central core of the machine. The room seemed to hum louder, the energy palpable in the air, as if the very walls were vibrating. Alina felt the ground beneath her feet tremble as the machine began to power up. The glow from the core intensified, filling the chamber with an eerie light that seemed to reach into her very soul. The machine was alive. Outside the chamber, the Earth itself responded. Volcanoes began to stir deep in the planet's crust. The oceans began to churn. Alina looked up at the sky, sensing that something massive, something beyond human understanding, was beginning to awaken within Earth itself. The primal force that had been dormant for eons was now ready to be unleashed, and with it came the power to fight back. As the machine roared to life, the ground beneath Alina's feet shuddered, a violent tremor rippling through the cave. It was as if the planet itself was awakening, responding to the ancient power now unleashed. The air around them crackled with energy, and a strange humming filled the chamber. The glowing core at the center of the machine pulsed faster, its light growing brighter by the second, flooding the room with an unearthly glow. Alina's heart pounded as she stood frozen in place. She could feel the power coursing through the air, thick and alive. The energy seemed to resonate within her very bones, an overwhelming force that tugged at her instincts. Her mind raced with questions. Was this the right thing to do? What would happen next? She tried to push the doubts aside, but the raw energy was so intense, it was impossible to ignore. "Captain, the machine. It's reacting," Dr. Lin said, his voice strained with awe and fear. He was standing at the console, his fingers flying over the controls, but his eyes never left the machine. "I've never seen anything like this. This isn't just technology. This is something else." Alina glanced at the rest of the team. They were equally captivated and terrified, watching the glowing energy surge higher. A distant rumble echoed from deep within the planet. Outside the cave, the world seemed to be responding. Storms were brewing, clouds swirling unnaturally over the horizon. The planet's surface was stirring, as if it too had felt the machine's power. It was a warning. "We need to get out of here," one of the soldiers said, his voice tight with fear. "This is too much. We don't know what we're dealing with." Alina's mind was torn. She knew the machine was their only hope, but there was a real danger of losing control of the force they had unleashed. The very earth beneath them seemed to quake with violent energy, as if the planet itself was starting to churn and thrash, awakening dormant powers from deep within. "Not yet," Alina replied, her voice steady despite the rising panic in the air. "We need to let it run its course. If this works, it will give us the power we need to stop the Shiker. We don't have any other options." The soldier hesitated but nodded reluctantly, understanding the urgency in her voice. They all did. The machine continued to hum, its energy expanding outward, sending tremors through the cave system. Suddenly, there was a deafening crack, like thunder, as the ground split open in front of them. Alina's heart raced as the entire structure seemed to shudder with an intensity that threatened to tear it apart. The team had to brace themselves against the walls to avoid being knocked off their feet. Outside, the storm clouds had turned into swirling cyclones, blotting out the sun and casting the landscape into a foreboding darkness. Alina's communication device buzzed to life with an incoming transmission from General Darius. "Captain, the Shiker are launching their assault. Earth's defenses are falling apart. You need to stop this power from escalating. If the planet's core destabilizes, we might lose everything." Alina's hand gripped the communicator tightly, her knuckles white. She knew the risk. The machine was tapping into forces far beyond human comprehension, and its energy had already begun to overwhelm the planet's natural balance. But what choice did they have? "We're too far in," she said, her voice low but resolute. "The power is already surging. If we stop now, we lose our only chance to fight back." As the conversation ended, Alina felt the ground shift again, this time with greater force. The chamber was collapsing around them, debris falling from the ceiling as the machine's energy reached its peak. The walls trembled violently, and Alina could see the cave's entrance begin to cave in. Outside, the earth itself seemed to roar as if alive, earthquakes and volcanic eruptions tearing through the planet's surface. The relic's power was no longer contained. What had been a dormant force hidden within Earth was now awakening, and it was beginning to reshape the world. "We need to move," Alina shouted, signaling for the team to retreat. They sprinted for the exit, the cave collapsing behind them as the entire structure shook with the energy of the machine's awakening. The air outside was thick with dust, the sky darkened by swirling clouds that seemed to reach for the planet below. As they emerged into the open air, they were greeted by the sight of massive tectonic shifts occurring before their eyes. Mountains crumbling, oceans churning, and volcanoes erupting in the distance. Earth was fighting back. But at what cost? "Is this really what we wanted?" one of the soldiers asked, his voice filled with disbelief as he watched the devastation unfold. The power they had unleashed was transforming the planet into a chaotic, violent force. "It has to be," Alina said, her voice hard and resolute. "We have no choice. The Shiker are coming, and if we don't stop them now, there will be nothing left of Earth to save." The sky above them was alive with chaos. Alina watched as the landscape around her erupted with violent force, mountains crumbling to the ground, forests torn apart by winds unlike any seen before. The earth was responding, shifting, and shaking under the strain of the machine's power. The ground below their feet trembled, threatening to swallow them whole as volcanic eruptions split the horizon. Lava poured from the earth's deep veins, igniting the atmosphere with an orange glow that contrasted sharply with the swirling black clouds overhead. "Captain, this is madness," Dr. Lin shouted, his voice barely audible over the roar of the earth. "We've unleashed something we don't understand. The balance of the planet it's destabilizing. We could be destroying everything." Alina's eyes swept over the team. They were all visibly shaken, their faces pale as they struggled to stay upright in the turbulent environment. But despite their fear, she could feel the weight of responsibility pressing down on her. She had made the call to activate the machine, to trust in something ancient and dangerous. Now she could only hope it would work as intended. "We can't turn back now," Alina said, her voice steady despite the turmoil around her. "If we stop now, The Shiker will destroy everything. We need to hold our ground." The soldier beside her nodded, his face grim. "We have no choice, Captain. But we need to hurry. The Shiker are closing in, and our forces are spread too thin. If this doesn't work, we're going to lose everything." Elena swallowed hard, her heart racing. The Shiker's invasion was relentless, and as their fleet entered Earth's atmosphere, it seemed there was no hope of defeating them with conventional weapons. The machine they had activated, the primal power buried within Earth itself, was their only chance. But now it felt as though they had unleashed something so powerful that it threatened to consume everything in its path. The ground shifted beneath their feet once again, and Elena felt the pull of the machine's energy as it continued to amplify. It was no longer just a machine. It was a force of nature, drawing upon the very core of Earth itself. The sky above was darkened by the growing clouds, the winds whipping through the air with a ferocity that made it almost impossible to hear anything else. "Look!" Dr. Lin shouted, pointing toward the horizon. Elena followed his gaze and saw it, a massive rift in the atmosphere, a tear in the fabric of space itself. The sky was cracking open, and through the rift, a massive fleet of Shiker warships descended like vultures, their dark shapes blotting out the stars. The enemy had arrived. "We don't have much time," Elena said, a new sense of urgency filling her voice. "Everyone get to your positions. Prepare for battle. The Earth is fighting back, and we need to make sure we're ready to hold our ground." As the team gathered their weapons and prepared for the inevitable confrontation, Elena looked out across the devastated landscape. The Earth was changing before her eyes, reshaping itself in response to the power they had unleashed. The energy in the air was palpable, and she could feel the raw might of the planet surging beneath her feet. The world was alive, its ancient power awakened, and it was clear that Earth had never fought like this before. The Shiker warships descended rapidly, their sleek alien designs cutting through the atmosphere like blades. The first wave arrived with terrifying speed, their weapons already primed to strike. Massive beams of energy shot toward the ground, ripping through the landscape and creating deep craters. The first blasts hit with devastating force, sending shockwaves across the planet. Elena's team barely had time to react before the second wave arrived, their shift shields flickering under the intensity of the Shiker's assault. "Return fire!" Elena shouted, her voice cutting through the chaos. The sound of their weapons discharging filled the air as they fired back at the incoming invaders. The Earth's primal force surged in response, as though the planet itself was lending them its power. The ground cracked open beneath the Shiker ships, and massive stone pillars shot up from the Earth, piercing the alien vessels. Lightning crackled in the air, striking down Shiker ships like bolts of divine fury. The sky seemed to come alive with energy, an unrelenting force that pushed back against the alien invaders. The Shiker fleet faltered under the onslaught, but their numbers were vast, and their technology was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. Elena knew that they couldn't rely solely on Earth's primal force to win this battle. The machine had given them a fighting chance, but they needed to act quickly and decisively before the Shiker regrouped and launched a counterattack. "Keep fighting," Elena commanded, her voice cutting through the madness. "This is our planet, and we're not going to let them take it from us." With that, she led her team into the fray, the raw power of Earth itself surging behind them as they fought for survival. They had awakened the planet's wrath, and now it was time to see if that wrath could save them, or if it would destroy everything they held dear. The battle raged on, and the sky above became a war zone. The once peaceful, vast landscape of Earth was now filled with fire and destruction. Elena's heart pounded as she watched the Shiker ships advance, their massive forms descending toward the ground like dark shadows, their weapons unleashing torrents of energy that shattered mountains and tore the Earth apart. The primal force that had been unleashed from the machine had given them a fighting chance, but the Shiker were relentless. Elena's team had fortified a small hilltop near the ruins of an ancient temple, their vantage point offering a clear view of the sky and the battlefield below. The stone pillars, now alive with energy, continued to rise from the ground, spearing through the alien ships, but the Xikra ships were not easily defeated. They fired back with deadly precision, sending waves of blasts toward the surface, incinerating everything in their path. "Captain, we can't hold them off forever," one of the soldiers shouted, his voice strained as he fired at an approaching Xikra ship. "Their fleet's too massive. We need to think of something else, or we're done for." Alina's eyes scanned the battlefield, calculating the odds. The Xikra ships had proven to be more advanced than Earth's military could handle. Their weapons were capable of tearing through entire cities with ease, and their shields were nearly impenetrable. But Earth had something they didn't: the planet itself. The primal force that had been awakened had already begun to alter the environment, and if they could learn to harness it, they might just have a chance. "We need to hit their command ship," Alina said, her voice calm despite the chaos surrounding them. "If we can take down their command structure, their coordination will collapse. We might be able to break their lines." Dr. Lin, who had been quiet during the battle, turned to her. "That's going to be difficult. The Xikra command ship is heavily shielded and protected. It's near the heart of the battle, and getting close enough to it without being wiped out is nearly impossible." Alina clenched her fists, her gaze never wavering from the battlefield. The sound of explosions echoed through the air as another wave of Xikra ships descended, their weapons firing indiscriminately. But Alina wasn't deterred. She knew they had one last opportunity, one final chance to strike back. They had to use the machine's power, the energy from the core, and channel it directly into their attack. "I think we can do it," Alina said. "We don't need to destroy the command ship, just disable it. If we can channel the energy of the Earth directly into their shields, we might be able to overload them." Dr. Lin's eyes widened as he processed her words. "You mean use the machine's power to interfere with their technology?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. "It could work, but it's risky. The energy required would be enormous." "We don't have time for caution, Lin," Alina said, her eyes narrowing. "It's the only chance we have." The team scrambled to make the necessary adjustments, rerouting power from the machine through their communication systems and into their satellite array. It was a desperate, untested plan, but it was their only option. As the soldiers set up their equipment, Alina kept a close watch on the battle unfolding in the distance. The Xikra ships were advancing, and their ground forces were closing in on their position. They couldn't afford to wait any longer. "Captain, we're ready," one of the soldiers reported, his voice tight with tension. Alina nodded. "Do it. Now." The energy from the Earth surged as they began the process. The ground beneath them seemed to tremble even more violently as the power from the machine's core was redirected, magnifying it through their systems. The air crackled with electricity as the raw force of the planet was focused toward the Xikra command ship, a brilliant beam of energy that lit up the sky like a second sun. For a moment, nothing happened. The Xikra ships continued their assault, seemingly unaffected by the attack. But then, a massive explosion erupted from the heart of the Xikra fleet. Their command ship, once surrounded by a nearly impenetrable shield, began to flicker and crackle, its energy shield destabilizing. The beam had hit its mark. "Yes," Dr. Lin shouted, his voice filled with exhilaration. "It worked. Their shields are failing." Alina didn't waste a second. "Fire everything we've got," she commanded, and the team unleashed their full arsenal. Their weapons combined with the raw energy of the Earth to create an overwhelming barrage of power that slammed into the Xikra ships. One by one, the massive vessels began to fall, their shields failing and their ships crumbling under the force of the attack. The tide of the battle was turning. But as the Xikra fleet began to retreat, Alina felt the ground beneath her once again tremble. The planet's primal power wasn't done yet. The raw energy that had been unleashed was still alive, still shifting beneath the surface, and Alina could feel it pushing them forward, driving them to finish what they had started. "There's no turning back now," Elena muttered, looking out over the battlefield. Earth was fighting back, and with it, humanity's last hope. The skies above Earth had become a battlefield of cosmic proportions. The remnants of the Xikar fleet flickered in the distance, their once imposing ships now reduced to smoldering wrecks in the atmosphere. But the war was far from over. The Earth's primal power, harnessed through the machine, had given them a chance to strike back. But at what cost? Elena stood at the edge of the ravaged landscape, watching as the Xikar forces retreated. The ground beneath her was still trembling, the echoes of the primal energy pulsating through the very bones of the planet. She could feel it, this unrelenting force beneath her feet, this ancient, living power that had been awakened to defend its home. But she also felt the danger, the unstable energy that could turn on them just as easily as it had fought the Xikar. "Captain, the Xikar are regrouping," Dr. Lin said, his voice filled with both relief and concern. "They're pulling back to the edge of the atmosphere. It seems like we've stunned them, but it won't take long before they come back with reinforcements." Elena nodded, her eyes scanning the horizon. The battle had shifted in their favor, but she knew they had little time. The Xikar might retreat for now, but their forces were vast, and they would not leave Earth untouched. This was only a temporary victory. "We need to prepare for their return," Elena said, her voice firm. "The machine gave us a window to strike, but we need to harness its power fully. If we're going to push them out of Earth's orbit for good, we need to unlock more of the machine's potential." Dr. Lin stepped forward, his face grim. "I've been analyzing the readings, Captain. The energy we're channeling is incredibly volatile. If we push too hard, there's a risk that the machine could destabilize Earth entirely. We've already seen tectonic shifts, volcanic eruptions, and storms unlike anything recorded in human history. I don't know what else it could unleash." Elena met his gaze with a steely resolve. "We don't have the luxury of playing it safe anymore. Earth is fighting back, and we need to use everything we have to push the Xikar off this planet for good." She turned to the team, who had gathered around the remnants of their base, eyes wide with both awe and fear. There was no turning back now. They had awakened Earth's wrath, and it was responding with a power they couldn't fully comprehend. "Dr. Lin, recalibrate the machine," Elena ordered. "We're going to need all the energy it can generate to push the Xikar fleet out of Earth's orbit. We've already drawn the line in the sand, but if we don't follow through, they'll return with reinforcements strong enough to finish what they started." The team immediately went to work, following Dr. Lin's lead. They adjusted the machinery, rerouting more power into the core, amplifying the energy that surged through the system. The chamber began to hum louder, the vibrations shaking the ground beneath them, as the machine absorbed even more of the planet's raw energy. Elena could hear the deep rumbling, the heartbeat of Earth itself, as if it was acknowledging their decision. As the energy swelled, Elena felt the intensity of it pressing down on her, an overwhelming force that seemed to pull at her very soul. She knew they were walking a fine line. If they pushed too hard, if they went beyond the machine's tolerance, the consequences would be catastrophic. Earth had already begun to fracture, its surface torn by volcanic eruptions and deep cracks. But the alternative was worse. The Xikar would return, and this time, they wouldn't show mercy. "Captain," Dr. Lin called out, his voice shaking. "The energy levels are off the charts. We're reaching the threshold. If we go any further, there's a chance the entire planet could destabilize." Elena didn't hesitate. "Do it. We have to finish this." The team activated the final sequence, and the machine's core flared brighter than ever before. The power coursing through the system shot upward into the sky, forming a massive beam of raw energy that reached into the heavens. The air crackled with electricity, and the earth beneath them roared in response. Elena watched, wide-eyed, as the beam pierced the clouds, shooting toward the Xikar fleet still hovering above Earth's atmosphere. The beam struck with the force of 1,000 storms. For a moment, there was a blinding flash of light that engulfed everything in its path. Elena shielded her eyes, that the power was so intense it seemed to sear the very fabric of space itself. The energy pulse reached the Zyker ships, and the first wave of their fleet was instantly engulfed in the blast. Their shields flickered and failed under the intensity, and their ships exploded in a blaze of fire. The remaining Zyker ships scrambled to regroup, but they were no match for the sheer power of Earth's wrath. The energy surged through space, ripping apart their forces, pushing them back beyond the reach of Earth's atmosphere. For the first time in days, Alina allowed herself a breath. The Zyker were retreating, their fleet scattered. But as the battle subsided, Alina felt the weight of the moment. The machine's power had saved them, but it had come at a cost. The earth still trembled beneath their feet, and the scars of the battle were far from healed. "We won," Alina whispered, "but at what price?" The world was still. For a moment, Alina could only hear the hum of the machine in the background and the soft creak of the ground beneath their feet. The immense energy released into the sky had shattered the remaining Zyker fleet, and the atmosphere had grown eerily quiet. The swirling clouds that had covered the sky for days were now parting, revealing the faint glimmer of sunlight breaking through for the first time in what felt like forever. But as Alina stood at the edge of the battlefield, her heart was heavy. She had led them to victory, but the cost was immeasurable. The earth beneath her feet was still shifting, still alive with the raw power they had awakened. It was a power that had saved them from the Zyker invasion, but Alina couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed within the very fabric of their world. They had bent the planet to their will, and now they would have to live with the consequences. Dr. Lin approached, his face drawn and weary, eyes reflecting the same mix of relief and concern. He looked up at the sky, as if searching for an answer that wasn't there. "It's over," Alina said quietly, more to herself than to anyone else. "The Zyker are gone. For now." "We've won," Dr. Lin said, though the words lacked conviction. "But at what cost, Alina? The energy from the machine. It's not just fading away. Earth is still unstable. The tectonic shifts, the storms, the energy fluctuations. This isn't over." Alina knew it. She could feel it too. The land was still trembling, the primal force surging beneath the surface like a restless beast, waiting to be awakened again. Earth was not a machine. It was alive, and they had awoken something far more powerful than they had ever imagined. "What happens now?" Alina asked, her voice barely a whisper. "We need to stabilize the machine," Dr. Lin said. "If we don't, the planet will continue to fracture, to shift and erupt until it tears itself apart. The energy we've unleashed could be the death of us all." "But we can't just turn it off," Alina replied, her mind racing. "The Zyker will return. We saw their numbers, their strength. We can't afford to let Earth fall back into a dormant state. We need to keep the power flowing, just more controlled." Dr. Lin ran a hand through his hair, frustration and fear evident in his expression. "We can't control it indefinitely. We can't keep pushing Earth to this limit. Something has to give." Alina's gaze shifted to the distant horizon. The vast landscape before her was marred by the scars of battle, the remnants of the chaos that had unfolded. She could see it now, the true cost of their victory. Their planet was broken, reshaped by forces beyond their comprehension. The Earth had fought back, but it had paid a heavy price. "We'll find a way to stabilize it," Alina said, her voice steady despite the uncertainty. "We'll learn to live with this power. We have to." But as she spoke those words, she couldn't help but wonder if it was too late, if the planet's primal force had already been unleashed beyond the point of no return. A sudden tremor shook the ground beneath them, more violent than any before. Alina's team staggered to their feet, weapons at the ready, fear in their eyes. The air was thick with electricity, the sky now swirling with dark clouds once again. The pulse of energy from the Earth was growing stronger, louder, more erratic. "It's happening again," Dr. Lin said, his voice filled with dread. "The machine can't hold it back. We've gone too far." Alina took a deep breath, steadying herself as the ground cracked open once again, fissures running deep across the surface. Earth was responding. Its primal force wasn't something they could control. It was a force of nature, one that had existed long before humanity's intervention, and would continue long after they were gone. And as much as they had fought to survive, as much as they had tried to control it, Alina understood now that they had only set the stage for something much larger. The planet wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. It was fighting for its future. "We need to retreat," Alina said urgently. "Get to the shelters. Now." The team moved quickly, racing toward the underground bunkers they had prepared for just such an occasion. Alina's heart pounded in her chest, and as she glanced over her shoulder, she saw the landscape erupt in a flash of raw energy. The primal force was no longer something they could tame. The Earth had woken up, and now it was its own master. As the last of the team reached the shelter, Alina paused for a moment, looking back at the Earth she had tried so desperately to save. The storm was building, the Earth's wrath pushing everything aside in its bid to reclaim control. And as the doors of the shelter closed behind her, Alina couldn't help but wonder, would they be the last humans to witness the planet's fury? Or would humanity find a way to adapt, to coexist with the force they had awakened? She didn't have an answer.